My name is Paxton, and my experience occurred in Western Canada on October 24th of 2015. I won't go into too many details about myself. What is important is my story that I must share with you. I have to get it off my mind, off my shoulders, because really, it has haunted me for far too long. I wake up in the middle of the night with cold sweats and trembling from terror. Consider this my experience and just believe me when I say this. I used to think the world was so simple, that there are things you see and that is it. But stuff happens and there's literally nothing you can do about it. I never believed in strange things, and by that, I mean the paranormal/supernatural. Now, I don't know what to think. I don't know what the best way to describe my experience is, but here it goes. I am, or at least I was, an urban explorer. I used to love going to abandoned places such as hospitals, apartment buildings, warehouses, etc. It was that sense of adventure and discovery of these derelict places that drew me into it. A friend of mine, I'll call him Joseph, actually found a rural place. It was an old farmhouse that was out of town. It was one of those isolated sites that you had to go in the middle of nowhere to get to, but he told me that it was well worth it. It was one of those places where, the family was murdered by somebody unknown, and now the place is forever haunted by the ghosts. Also, this is a place where satanic rituals took place and demonic spirits are known to haunt the area. Every town has stories like these, made up by somebody to try and scare one of their friends or whatnot. Matter of the fact, it comes down to that nobody actually knows what happened here. Nobody knows why the family vanished. It was as if they simply got up and left. All their belongings were there, everything was left behind. That of course took place 30 years ago though, and the place has stood silent ever since. So it was October 24th, on a wet and grey autumn day. There were scattered showers that soaked the highway. In order to get to the house, we had to drive off the pavement onto a muddy dirt road that was surrounded by rows and rows of trees which swayed in the wind. It was a 2-story house with a peaked roof and attic above. At one time, it would have been a peaceful and comfortable place really for anybody to live. Now, it's just a shell of its former self, surrounded by farm grounds and concealed by many trees. Nature has just reclaimed this place. Despite the condition though, I was pleasantly surprised to see the lack of graffiti and damage that's usually left by teenagers. Yeah, there were a few empty bottles left around on the decks of the house, but the windows were still boarded up, nothing too bad. However, the back door was still open wide. The boards were removed and tossed to the side. It was just like that last time, said Joseph. We then continued exploring the exterior of the property. There were a couple of sheds out back and there was an old beat up corpse of a truck. In a field beyond that, I noticed that there was some odd collection of white stones. There was loads of them scattered about on the ground. Oh, that's funny. I didn't notice that last time I was here, Joseph remarked to me. Looking at the stones carefully, you could see that they formed some kind of spiral pattern. Intrigued, we approached the stones. I don't know if I imagined this or what, but I swore that I could smell ozone, the aroma of lighting. I crouched down and examined one of the stones and noticed that there was something weird. There was something etched onto its surface. It kind of looked like a glyph, but I'm not exactly sure. It was something that I wasn't familiar with. Thinking of it now, it was more like a triangle that was missing one of the sides on it. It was very odd. The other ends had two squiggly circles with another T shape. I looked at another stone to my side and it too had the same etching on it. That's bizarre. I wonder what all of that is, Joseph said. It was apparent that he definitely hadn't come across these stones earlier. I could tell. I could hear some fear in his voice. I just shook my head, not knowing what to say. We then approached the back of the house, flashlights at the ready as we entered the house one at a time. We were greeted by what appeared to be the kitchen. Now, it was cold inside, real cold. It was very gloomy, but that is to be expected, of course. Besides our flashlights, the only light coming through was the distorted light that was peeking through the boards covering the windows. There was a mess of debris scattering across the floor. There were pots and pans and plates everywhere. There was a large wooden table that stood in the middle of the kitchen. It was covered in at least 3 decades worth of dust. The fridge and sink were coated in rust in the corner. The paint was falling from the walls. But besides the mess, it was just free of vandalism. It was kind of weird. We moved next to the living room, which was larger than we expected. It had a very big rodent-infested couch and other sofas. The coffee table was flipped to its side. There was a television set with a screen that caked itself with mold and dust. The air, it had that distinct smell of mold and urine. Dusty old books and newspapers covered the floor in stacks. Near the front entrance to the house, there was a set of stairs going up to the 2nd floor. I turned and then approached the brick fireplace and shined the flashlight. There was what appeared to be a photograph. I picked it up out of the confined space and blew the dust and ash off it. It was a family photo. The faces had all been scratched out. This has to be the family, I muttered to myself. What's that? Joseph asked me and I handed it to him. Yikes, he said, then placing the photo onto the mantelpiece. I then shined the flashlight onto the walls and illuminated the portraits on the walls. I assumed they were photos of the family, but just as a photograph, all of the faces had been scratched out on it. Upon further examination, I noticed that the faces were scratched out in a spiral fashion. I felt like a snake slithering around my spine. I shuddered in response. What do you think happened to them? I asked. Nobody knows. They just got up and left, I guess. There was no sign of foul play or anything beyond that from what I know, Joseph explained as he also gazed at these photos in almost disbelief. I then gazed back at the photos and I kind of began getting lost in my own thoughts, trying to figure out just what had happened here. Where do you suppose that goes? Joseph said, as he shined the light at the end of the hallway adjacent to us. There was a door that was slightly ajar. I creeped a few steps forward until I was face to face with the door, taking one look back at Joseph. Hesitantly, I nudged the door slightly and it opened a little bit. I could see that it opened to a set of descending stairs down into the basement. Well, Paxton, do you want to check out the basement or upstairs first? Joseph asked me with a crooked smile. Let's just go down and get it over with, I joked. Little did I know, I just made a huge mistake. While shining the torch into the inky blackness below, we were assaulted by a powerful smell of mould. It was even worse now. As I then began my ascent into the darkness below, the steps creaked under every footstep that I made. As I hit the fourth step, there was a loud cracking sound, and the step just given way underneath me. For a fraction of a second, I was suspended in midair, and for that fraction of a second I knew that I messed up big time. I just had enough time to open my mouth and scream. Part of the staircase joined my descent into the darkness of the basement. I had just fell into the cold, tepid water that was several inches thick. My feet contacted with the hard cement floor. My right ankle was twisted. Boards then fell on top of my head, and I slumped against the water. My screams were then strangled by the nasty, bitter-tasting water. I jerked my head out of the disgusting, murky water in the darkness. I gagged and choked, spitting out the stagnant fluid crying out of my body. I was in complete shock. I tried to stand up but stumbled as burning pain shot up my leg and my right ankle. I then just slumped against a wall. Paxton! Paxton! Joseph shouted from above. I then fished around the water for the flashlight that, surprisingly, was still working, although the light was now flickering on and off. Paxton! Joseph shouted out. I felt a burning sensation on my chest and back. I examined myself with the flashlight and saw that there were broken splints of wood embedded throughout my skin. There were rivers of blood dripping out everywhere from my wounds. Oh God! Oh God! I cried out to myself. You okay? Joseph called out again. No, I said weakly. I'll get you out there. Just hold on, man. Joseph shouted as he took off. Wait! I cried out, but he didn't hear me. Of all the times we explored abandoned places, we never found ourselves in any situations like this. We always made a habit of exploring places inside and out, leaving no stone unturned. I pushed myself up against the wall, shivering from the cold darkness of the submerged basement. I shined the flashlight to check my surroundings. The beam of light could barely penetrate the darkness. The brick walls were dripping with some desolate ichor and mould. The water continued to ripple around me as I made movement, trying to get a better look into the unknown. Everywhere I looked, however, I saw black. That is when I heard something. I heard splashing as if something was rising from the water. I saw movement in the darkness. The silhouette of a shape rising from the water that caused me to freeze like an animal caught in the headlights of an oncoming vehicle. The realization that I was not alone. My mind simply refused to process what my eyes were observing. I shined the light at the shape, desperately trying to illuminate it. I couldn't get enough light to form. It was almost as if light was being absorbed by it. Something was very wrong here. I didn't dare to ask who was there. I tried to move, but a jolt of sharp pain shot throughout my entire body. I cried out in agony, as if in response. The shape then come towards me. The stench overpowered me simultaneously. It was a stench that I knew all too well. One summer many years ago as a kid, I was riding my bike with some friends when the chain come off my bike while I was riding. I ended up in some ditch just inches away from the pulpy remains of a deer. It was that smell. The smell of death that was now sharing the basement with me. "Joseph, please," I cried to myself. I had tears running down my face. The shape was slowly moving towards me. Soon, I then heard heavy footsteps upstairs. By this point, my heart felt like it was going to explode. Death had its grip on me. "Joseph! Joseph, get me out of here! There's something down here in the basement, get me out!" I pleaded. I saw it. A pale, gaunt face was illuminated by my flickering light. Its eyes were black with pupils that were surrounded by red blood vessels. The thing instantly closed the gap between us and was right in my face. It let out a terrifying, harrowing scream, and that's when everything went black. I came round to find myself in Joseph's truck. We were speeding down the highway. He brought me to the hospital and I was treated for my injuries. I even had to take medical leave from work as well. I wasn't able to concentrate and looked terrible. I'd been back to the doctors, but I couldn't tell them about my experience, so I just said that I was under a lot of stress. I spoke to my friend Joseph about what happened at the abandoned farmhouse. I told him what I saw in the basement. He went pale as I explained the ghost to him. He nodded his head in agreement. He saw it too. When he returned with the ladder he got from his truck, he looked to find me, and for a slight second, he saw that I was in fact not alone. It gazed up at him and dissolved into the darkness. That's when he saw me black out. I think we were both in a state of shock. What was that thing in the basement? That face has forever been burned into my mind, and the image of that thing. The mute scream. Was it a roar or a cry? I don't know. I've never been back to that place and I will never go back again. I've given up my exploration hobby and so did Joseph. I think it's safe to say that we have both changed since that day and what happened. I relive that encounter almost every night in my dreams. Sometimes I get that feeling that I'm being watched by someone. Sometimes I think I hear scratching noises coming from inside the walls, but I know that's only my mind. I haven't told my parents or siblings about this. The only thing that I said to them is that I had an accident while exploring an abandoned house. What would I even say to them? Hello everyone, thank you for watching. I tried to narrate that story as scary as possible, and I found it a very engaging story to read and I really enjoyed narrating it. So I hope you all enjoyed that video. I'm going to give a big thank you to Celephais for sending me in that great story. I really enjoyed narrating it and it is a very good story, so thank you. If you have a story you'd like me to narrate of your own, then be sure to send it in through my email below. I was also going to say that I'm trying to come up with a name for my fans. Somebody once suggested Insomniak Shack, which I quite liked, but I'll leave that up to you guys. I'm just about to go and get on with my other videos now, so I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you all. I hope you all have a great day and take care of yourselves.